Hi, welcome to the Old Geezer's Diary. It's Monday the 29th of July 2019. I'm Chris and my topic today is the BBC and the over 75 licence fee. So, the BBC licence fee and older people. What do you think? Now I know what I think and I'm happy to tell you. At the moment, I think the BBC has gone really miles off the track that most of us would have liked it to. The BBC runs two spectacularly good TV channels, BBC One and BBC Two. Those channels, I think, are brilliant and they do a grand job for most people. They also run, effectively, a core of four outstanding radio channels as well. Radio 1, which is kind of poppy. Radio 2, which is kind of more relaxed. Radio 3, which is classical. And Radio 4, which is a speech-based, essentially a current affairs channel. And those four core channels are spectacularly good as well. We don't all listen to all of them, but I certainly listen to two of them at various times and get a lot out of them. So I think the BBC's, if you like, core products are spectacularly good. And I think one of the things that comes across in all of this is that those channels are seriously appealing to people who are interested in the world around them, and that includes most of the UK's older generation. But the BBC also runs a large number of other, what I can only call really assorted channels. Those channels range from, hip-hop music channels and whatever, and sport channels and all this kind of stuff. And they run all of those channels. They run them very well. I don't have an argument with the way they run them, but I have a question over should the BBC be doing that at all in the first place. I don't believe the BBC has a role in doing anything other than things that benefit the whole of the population in some way. We can say the same thing for some of their specialist radio stations, like for instance, I would say that the BBC Asian network is immensely important because it provides a very straight and honest radio station for that community, because the trouble is that, like all minority communities, that community is currently served by commercial stations which can have their own agenda, so you need someone giving the straight message, and that's true of the other channels, all the other stuff and the channels I've mentioned. So in other words, the BBC, its core product, 2 TV channels, 4 radio channels, those need to be kept straight down the line. Now the question is, what does all the rest cost and what does all the rest do? All the rest does is really, if you like, compete with the existing commercial channels. All the rest does is essentially compete with the huge array of external sources of entertainment and information that there are. And the BBC seems to have a golden position where it gets our money from whatever we do, whatever we watch. If we have a TV in our house, we have to pay 154 quid to the BBC. Do I think that's fair? No, I don't. And I certainly don't think it's fair that the older generation, who probably paid their TV licence all their lives as well, have to now pay it when we've been getting it free. And especially when older people, in many cases, are being more and more, if you like, financially isolated and physically isolated. I think that's a big concern. And I think the mighty BBC needs to have a serious think about what it's doing and where it's going. I don't believe that the BBC should put up the charge to older people. I do believe there might be a case for making, if you like, a cut price for the over 75s. If the over 75s, who predominantly, let's say, use BBC, say BBC One, BBC Two, probably Radio 2 and maybe Radio 4, if they made a budget version of the licence fee for people over 50, let's say a half price deal or a 50 quid deal for that age group, then that would generate some additional income. But it would stop the BBC spending ludicrous amounts of money on channels that don't make sense. The only channel that the BBC started and effectively killed was BBC Three, which was the youth channel on TV, and then a youth channel on the internet, and I don't know whether it's even still running. But that just demonstrated the point that the BBC doesn't really have a place to play in that marketplace. I think the BBC should really stick to broadcasting. It should stick to its core 4 radio channels and 2 TV channels, and it should cut its cloth. It is, whether it likes it or not, one outlet of many. It has those, let's call it 6 primary channels, but that puts it in a marketplace. If you look at the Sky TV listing, that puts it in a marketplace of several hundred outlets. If you put it into context with the UK's radio spectrum, it makes channels against how many hundreds, I don't know. But the reality to all of this is that the BBC is currently being treated as a golden boy, if you like, whereas in fact it's just another player. Now, in the dim and distant past, when broadcasting was really specialised and you had to be really smart to do it, then the BBC had a really serious place. But now in a modern world, when even an old geezer like me can sit in front of you and gab on effectively for no cost much for either of us, then there's a big change, and that change has to be accounted for by the BBC. I'm Chris, this is the Old Geezer's Diary, and if you like what I do, click on like. If you want to see more of what I do, click on the subscribe button, and if you really want to get notifications of when I put up new video, click on the little bell next to the subscribe button and you'll get a notification when something new goes up. You can find me on YouTube at the Old Geezer's Diary and under the same name on Facebook, on Twitter, and of course we also have a little website which you can find as Old Geezer's Diary on something called Blogspot. So if you want to find me online, you can. I love to hear from you. Get in touch with me. I'm Chris, this is the Old Geezer's Diary, and I will see you soon.